This has been one of those weeks where it seemed like everything that could go wrong did. The tractor's broken, the truck's broken, the foxes are after the chickens. I started this week trying to get these hay bales. We found somebody that had 12 bales that somebody had bought from them last year, and they never came to pick them up, and so they were sitting out all winter and they're starting to fall apart. They were giving them away for free, and there's a lot of good hay in them still, but because they're falling apart, moving them becomes a challenge. You can only fit 10 to 12 bales on the trailer if we stack them right, but since these are falling apart, they weren't going to stack, and I put the sideboards on so that it wasn't just falling all over the place. Because of that, I really was only able to get 4 on there, so that meant 3 trips to get 12 bales. Removing the back bales was no big deal. I could just pick them up with the forks and they came off pretty easily. But for the ones that I couldn't reach from the back, it became a little bit more difficult. I had in my head that I'd be able to just pick them up with the grapple and it'd be pretty easy, but the grapple just doesn't open wide enough and I would have just been picking little pieces and it just would have been a mess. Using the forks with the ratchet strap worked, but it was pretty time consuming. Then, right as I finished unloading the last big chunks that I could get on the forks, something in the loader joystick linkage broke, and so I couldn't use the loader. Fortunately, I got all the big pieces that I could get, but I think I actually could have picked up a lot of the last stuff with the grapple, but I ended up just having to shovel it off. And that ended my hopes of trying to go get another load that day. I would have had enough time to get the load, but I would have had no way to get it unloaded, and I was planning to go get wood chips for the garden the next day, and so I couldn't do that. This week's video is supposed to be back here in the shop working on some items on the truck. I had some smaller items I started working on, and I was going to diagnose that ticking noise. I started work on that some last week, and I was planning to finish it up this week. Well, I went to go get that load of wood chips, and I got loaded up, but I didn't get very far before the truck started having transmission issues. Those free wood chips are starting to look pretty expensive. Needless to say, those smaller items are going to take a back seat until we figure out what's going on with the transmission. I was planning on trying to work on getting this area behind me cleaned up this week. We took down a bunch of trees over here last year and never got them cleaned up because if I remember correctly, the tractor was in the shop because I was trying to address some hydraulic leaks. Well, since the tractor's down again this week, I don't think we'll be getting to that. But the chickens are working. They don't quit on me. They're always working. Except when the foxes find them, then they don't work so well. Speaking of that, we moved the chicks outside the beginning of this week as well. That went well, but the next morning, 4 were missing. I haven't had problems with predators getting into these chicken tractors before, and there weren't any signs of that. Best we can tell, there probably was a small gap underneath, and they got out underneath. I have seen that happen before when you're not on a perfectly level spot with these, and they're very small. They can sneak out underneath. It doesn't take that much of a gap. And once they're out, then they're sitting ducks or chicks. So we moved them to a more level spot. But then the next night, I saw a fox on the security camera. So I set up this net around them. We have seen the fox out here some more, but we haven't lost any more, so that seems to be working. Sometimes when things aren't going the way that you want them to, it's good to just have something mundane to do. We're wanting to get this area cleared up so we have a spot where trucks can easily get in and dump wood chips so we can get people to bring us wood chips rather than having to go get them, which would be a big time saver for us. Yeah, it'd be easier if I had the tractor to do this with, but sometimes it's good to just get out the hand tools and do stuff by hand, and chainsaw and a weed eater sure beats doing it with a machete or something like that. So it's all a matter of perspective. Looks like this thing's gonna need a tune-up. Running a little rich. Guess we'll add it to the list. And doing little projects like that just helped me to relax and get a small win and focus on the positive things. Yeah, the tractor's broken, but I know what's wrong with it. It's a relatively simple fix. And fortunately, I've got this third function control valve on it, so I can easily just switch over the control harness and the hoses, and then I'm still able to raise and lower the loader, and I can still use the tractor for a rear attachment. Losing chicks is never fun, but it's part of the process and you bake it into the chicken math, you account for that. What's that saying? Everything's trying to eat a chicken, we're just trying to eat it first? Something like that. The good news for those of you who like the repair videos, we got plenty of those coming up. It's frustrating when things break down at an inconvenient time or in an inconvenient location, but that's just part of it. When you have things mechanical, they're gonna break, and particularly when you're running older equipment and higher mileage vehicles, it's just part of the process. And something good will come out of it. We're gonna end up with something better than we started with. We'll get to learn something along the way, and it's all just part of the adventure. Transmission issues is definitely not what I was hoping for, and honestly probably was my biggest concern as to why I had mentioned before I was trying to decide whether I was gonna keep it or sell it. It is a higher mileage truck, and in my experience with this powertrain, the engines last a long time, but the transmissions, usually 250 to 300,000 miles is the usable life on them, and then it's time for a rebuild. So now we'll get to dive into that, figure out what's going on, and at the end of the day, we'll know what we've got, and there won't be any concerns about transmission issues. Yeah, it wasn't a convenient place for it to break down. I had to get it towed, but when I bought the truck, it was running rough, and I didn't know if I was gonna be able to drive it home then, and I had figured that I may have to have it towed home when I bought it, and fortunately I was able to drive it home then, and that tow would have been a lot longer and more expensive than what this one was, so it all balances out. And since the engine repair was so cheap, we can spend some money on the transmission and still end out in a good place. I know this week's video is a little bit different than normal, but it's just the reality of what's going on around here. Next week's video, we'll be working on the tractor, getting that joystick repaired, and then we'll be on to the truck, diagnosing that transmission. So I hope to see you back here for those videos. Thanks so much for watching.